Is this on?
Yes, my lord.
Good. Hello, this is God speaking. Can we dial that down?
Yes, my lord.
Thanks. Welcome, new arrival to the Eternity Ward. Please take a number and make your way down to the left or the right to the waiting room. All you need is the refreshments I made just for you. I would tell you to steer clear of the apples, they're forbidden, and the 2 snakes. I mean, fools, sorry, that are chewing the fat in the corner, but you probably wouldn't listen anyway. So good luck, I bless you, and on your way.
Welcome to the Eternity Ward, where we flick through old copies of Reader's Digest and chat with our buddies while we wait for an appointment with God. I'm Nick McKinnon.
And I'm Chris Adams. How you going, Nick? That's how we start. How you going?
Because everyone cares how we're going, Chris. I'm going well.
It's just polite.
It is polite, and we love politeness.
Really, I don't just ask that question just hoping for a polite answer. If you want to tell me how you're really going, Nick, by all means, tell me how you're really going.
Oh, now you've got me. Oh, I'm actually fine. Actually, I was in tears earlier, Chris.
Tears?
Yeah.
You stub your toe?
No. I was reading.
Yeah.
That's what real men cry about, reading. I was reading about what we're going to be getting into tonight, Chris.
Yeah. We're going to be getting into talking about refugees.
We are.
Because at the moment, we're into like the 11th day, I think, of Manus Island being closed, where there's still 606 refugees, all men, 606 men at the Manus Island Detention Centre, which is closed.
It's Australia's Guantanamo Bay.
That's a stretch. Like, I do liken it to a concentration camp in some ways, but we don't, have our detainees with hoods on their heads and water tortured. But we still put them through a whole lot of dehumanisation, which we will get into. But there are 606 men who have been told to move on, and there's accommodation provided nearby, but they do not feel safe to go to that accommodation because there has been a lot of friction between the detention centre and the community.
They've been shot at.
Yeah, people have died. Yeah. They're refusing to leave. There's no power, no water, no food, no sanitisation. I don't even know if they have that much access to the shelter, if they can get into the buildings or whatever, but they...
Yeah, I think they can.
They can? Right. They're there, and a lot of people are protesting. A lot of people are angry. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people are worried. A lot of people are really apathetic. A lot of people are happy this is happening.
Who are the happy people? I'm not sure I know about the happy people.
Who are the happy people? The people that want Australia to have a really hard line towards refugees, like a seriously hard line.
Okay. They're happy that people are being harmed.
Well, I'm thinking the pretty hard line ones. I'm thinking like the white nationalists that were like, attacking Sam Dastyari the other day, and even Pauline Hanson calling him a waste of space. So he's a Muslim politician here in Australia who just got attacked by when I say attacked, I mean verbally attacked by a whole lot of white nationalists.
Those sort of folk.
I don't know if they want people to be harmed, but they certainly don't want them here. So they're quite happy for a really hard line. Australia's adopted a really hard line for quite a while now towards refugees in an attempt to break the people smuggling business into Australia. And there's, I guess, different motivations as to what people will say why they want to do that. Is it to stop drownings at sea? Is it because they don't like the colour of their skin? There could be a whole host of reasons. And I mean, we end up stop calling them refugees and call them illegals and illegal arrivals. And also the language keeps changing all the time as well. Even the language of the force that deals with them, border force, border patrol, it's been an ever-changing landscape here. But the one constant is that there's been a lot of people in detention for a long time offshore here in Australia. And now that's closed and they're not going anywhere.
So before we get into the why are Australia doing this, all that sort of quagmire, which I'm sure we'll get into, I thought it'd be helpful, this is the thing that got me into tears, is looking at what are refugees? Who are these people that are stuck in these detention centres? Because, like you say, we come up with these labels for people. And, in Australia, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in Australia, this issue's been going on for so long that the term refugee sort of starts to lose meaning. You hear about it, but you don't really think, what are these people? So can I give you a story that I read today?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Great. So one of the current refugee crisis that is occurring at the moment is the Rohingya, which I'm sure you've heard of. So they're a Muslim minority in the majority Buddhist country of Myanmar or Burma, depending on who you talk to.
Is that Myanmar? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's however you tell me to pronounce it, Chris, as if I'd know.
No, Myanmar could work too. Yeah.
I can point to it on a map. I'm pretty happy with that. So there's this one lady that I read about, Rajuma. So she's a 20-year-old Rohingya woman who lived in a town of Tula Toli. I couldn't point to that on a map, just to be clear. So she lived in that little town in Myanmar, and she was telling the story that on the 30th of August, the Burmese soldiers stormed into her village and started setting the buildings alight, setting them on fire. The soldiers then led the villagers down to their river, where they separated the men from the women. They executed all of the men in front of them before the soldiers turned to the women. They grabbed Rajuma's infant boy, didn't say how old the boy was, but an infant boy, out of her arms. She was holding onto him, obviously pretty upset at this point. They took him from her arms and threw him into one of these fires while she was watching. So she watched her infant son burn to death. And so after this, Rajuma was then beaten and gang raped by the soldiers, along with her two sisters and the other women that were there. And so this is the sort of stuff we're talking about. And so Rajuma then fled without any clothes, just naked and bloodied, just fled and joined with other Rohingya that were fleeing to Bangladesh. So these are the sort of people with the sort of stories that is a refugee. Those are people who are fleeing persecution in their homeland. They can't stay where they are. It's obvious that she can't go back to Myanmar. And so those are the sort of stories that you read them and go, holy crap. These are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real human beings, and it's a complicated issue.
Yeah. And Aung San Suu Kyi, is that how you pronounce her name? She's
What a hero.
Yeah, Nobel Peace Prize.
Who is she, Chris?
Who is she? Well, she was a political prisoner for a long time, many, many, many years. A lot of people in the world fought to get her out of prison. I don't know how many years she was kept in house arrest because she was wanting to, what we thought was to lead the nation to overthrow a military, would you call it a dictatorship, or what do you call a military running a nation?
You call it Myanmar.
So, yeah, and what a wonderful day it was when she was finally released, and what another wonderful day when she was elected leader of that nation. And now this is going on. This is what's happening under her watch.
And her reaction to it was, well, it's complicated and...
Yeah, so now they're wanting to revoke her Nobel Peace Prize. And yeah, it's because she was a bit of a hero of mine years and years ago. But that's hardly as devastating as what's happening to those actual people, you know.
Poor Chris.
Losing a hero like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. But yeah, now we have 60 to 70 million of these refugees worldwide.
If you say so. The number I saw was 1 million.
You saw a number of 1 million. Okay.
As in 1 million UNHCR refugees.
Oh, are you talking about Myanmar?
No.
You're talking about worldwide?
Yeah, UNHCR.
Okay, looking now. UNHCR report says 65.3 million displaced from their homes by conflict and persecution in 2015.
Yeah, so a displaced person is different to a refugee.
Oh, okay. Yeah, displaced is internal to the country. Refugee is outside their borders. Okay. Oh, and now I see a breakdown figure. 65 million displaced, 40 million internal, over 22 refugees, that's external, and almost 3 million asylum seekers. So it's the number you saw. Is that about asylum seekers?
No, I think So, like, a lot of refugees end up being taken in by neighbouring countries.
Yes.
I was looking at the number that the UNHCR need to be taken by other countries. So the UNHCR estimates that about 80,000 resettlement placements are offered each year, and more than 1 million are needed per year.
Right. But doesn't that number then just continue to climb if less than 10% are resettled a year and there's more coming all the time?
Or they die. I don't know.
Geez, heck. Even the numbers are complicated.
The numbers are complicated.
But whatever the number, we have a moral obligation. I know you believe that, to help. But not just moral. We have a legal reason since we signed the UN Convention for Refugees way back in 1951. We are part of that treaty, right?
We have signed that.
We've signed it.
We signed it.
We are not living up to it.
We have done nothing illegal.
I don't know about that. I thought we were contravening the law enough that we had to fight our own high court and change a whole bunch of laws. But I guess that there's nothing that the UN seems to be able to enforce. But I just reckon we're flying in the face of it.
In what sense have we been flying in the face of it?
Well, the major clause from that document is the issue of refoulement. If the person is classified as a legitimate refugee escaping, fleeing persecution, you cannot send them back into a place where they will be persecuted.
So if a Rohingya refugee turns up in Australia, we can't send them back to Myanmar or Myanmar.
That's correct.
But we can send them to Malaysia.
Yes, I guess so.
Or Papua New Guinea.
Well, ideally to another signatory nation.
So we haven't done anything illegal.
We've sent Tamils back to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, if we have looked at their situation and gone, well, they don't really have a security risk. Now, I'm not saying we're right in all of those situations, but like you and I don't see the reports that ASIO do. And it is, I think, dangerous for me personally to just presume that ASIO are just puppets of the government who just want to send them back. I just don't think that's true. I think ASIO are better than that. And I think the government is better than that.
What if they're not?
I think you need evidence for that.
Yeah, okay, you might need evidence for it, but this all sort of started, with the Children Overboard incident way back with John Howard, that there was a lie. It all started with a lie to try and generate fear among a population for him to get put back into government, voted back into government. He wanted to divide people and get a whole lot more on his side because these people are barbarians, they're throwing people in the water, and that was found to be a lie. There's been a lot of painting this picture of these people and dehumanizing them in the sense that the word refugee, as you were saying earlier, doesn't really mean anything to a lot of people anymore. We've become very desensitized to it, become very apathetic about it. You become tired of hearing about it. For someone like me who gets really angry about our treatment of refugees, I get tired of being angry about it and worn down.
Yeah. But I think there's a difference between politicians. Like, in my mind, of course, politicians are going to use any situation for political purposes because that's their job.
Yes.
But ASIO is different. They're not politicians. Their job is the security of Australia. And whoever the border force are, their job isn't political. Their job is to assess each person. And under the UN declaration or whatever it was that we signed, they have to work within that. And I don't think it makes sense to me that they would just be puppets of the government. It seems like a caricature to me and not what would actually be going on.
If we're working within it, why has the UN been angry with Australia about these issues for years now? They've been on our case a lot. Heaps.
Yeah.
So even if we might be going to the letter of the law, are we going to the spirit of the law? And if we're not, then why aren't we?
Earlier this year, the head of ASIO was asked, is there a link by Pauline Hanson, it should be made clear, is there a link between refugees and terrorism? And the head of ASIO, I can't remember his name, it's something Lewis, said he isn't aware of any link between refugees and terrorism.
Right.
And many media people around the country went, see, Pauline Hanson, you idiot. Of course there's no link. And to me, this is just so obviously false that there is obviously a link between, like, if you actually want to look at it and not just get bogged down in what you already believe, then it's obvious that there is a link between refugees and terrorism.
So the link you're talking about is that terrorism is putting their own cell members into a refugee situation so that they can then carry out something within that country that they end up in. That's what you're referring to as a link?
I don't know exactly how they do it, but I can go through the list if you want of every terrorist attack in recent memory has been carried out by either a refugee or the son of a refugee. The Lint Cafe siege was done by an Iranian refugee, Manus. The concert bombing in Manchester, 22 people died, was the son of a Libyan refugee. Farad Jabbar murdered the Sydney police accountant Curtis Chang, who was so Farad Jabbar was an Iraqi Kurdish refugee. Naman Haider, who stabbed 2 police officers in Melbourne, was an Afghan refugee. Muhammad Ali Bariale or something was a top recruiter for Australia for Islamic State. He was an Afghan refugee. Sani Ido Awais was jailed for his role in the plot to attack the Holsworthy Army base, was a Somali refugee. And the last 4, this is in Australia, the last 4 fatal terrorist attacks were all conducted by refugees or sons of refugees. Right. So pretending that there's no link between refugees and terrorism in Australia is just, I don't understand it. Pretending that there isn't drives people to support people like Hansen, who does have racist, xenophobic views.
Yeah. Is he potentially saying that there's no link in the sense that there's no terrorist organisation which is, has people on its books that they're sending into a country as refugees? Is that why he's saying there's no link, but then people within get recruited while they're in a country? I don't know. But yes, if you're saying all of those attacks were done by refugees, is there a link? Well, 1 + 1.
It's obvious.
There's a link.
So when Pauline Hanson says that, everyone, including everyone on the left, should go, yes, you're right, there is. Now, that doesn't mean that we stop all refugees, but it does mean that we acknowledge the problem.
Yeah.
And say, well, where to from here?
Right.
But most people don't do that. Most people just go, no, it's not true. It's not true. Pauline Hanson's a racist. And they just don't even engage in the problem.
Right.
And it doesn't help anyone.
Well, maybe if it was brought forward by someone other than Pauline Hanson, maybe we would...
Like who? Who's going to bring it up? Adam Bandt's not going to bring it up.
All right, so what do you want me to talk to about this?
I don't know. Do you agree that there is a link between terrorism and refugees?
If all of the terrorist acts were committed by refugees, then there is a link.
Brilliant. That was easy. Now, the thing that most people on the left will say in response to this is, but not all refugees are terrorists.
Yeah.
And of course, that's obvious.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone is seriously saying, other than those redneck idiots that attacked Sam Dastyari, who were calling him a terrorist, which is just ludicrous. And so that's unhelpful, obviously. Not all refugees are terrorists. No one serious is saying that.
We had a left-wing person calling a right-wing person a terrorist the other day, didn't we?
We did.
Was that unhelpful too?
That's the way it always works, isn't it? I don't think I've ever heard a right-wing... Oh, yeah, okay. No,
hang on, you were just talking about that.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah, so I'm sure you're referring to Adam Bandt. So Adam Bandt is a Greens, which is a left-wing party in Australia. He's their only member in Parliament. And he called Peter Dutton, who is the immigration minister of the government, a terrorist because he didn't seem to care that he was harming people on Manus Island. And so that made him a terrorist, apparently.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'd rather just callous prick. Can we just go with that?
Or maybe he's aware of more information than we are.
Well, he has to be privy to more information.
There's a reason why when Obama gets into power, he doesn't do all the things that he said he was going to do. He didn't close Guantanamo. There's a reason why Aung San Suu Kyi didn't do all the things that she thought she was going to be able to do and that we thought she was going to be able to do when she got into power. She didn't become a bad person overnight.
What's the reason?
Yeah, well, I don't know, because I'm not aware of... Well, look, part of it with her is that there is a military that is in charge of the country.
Yes.
And so no matter what she says, like if she says stuff that is too offensive to them, they can just kick her out.
So isn't the same...
So work within the system or just be a Greens party that can just lob bombs and not actually ever have to govern.
So would Obama have not been in a similar situation in the fact that even though he was president, he didn't have the full power that he wanted to be able to implement all that he wanted because he's got to work within a system and there's a lot of people within that system that, but maybe he changed his mind. We don't really know, but there needs to be more transparency.
But maybe there can't be. Like when you're talking about national security stuff, you can't just tell everyone everything. You've got to keep some things close to your chest. If you tell the terrorists everything that you know, well, you're giving everything away.
Well, I'm not going to trust Peter Dutton. I'm not.
Yeah.
If you want to blindly trust him, I'm going to blindly not.
I don't want to blindly trust him, but I
Right.
certainly don't want to
Yeah.
pretend like he's the equivalent of a terrorist who
No.
deliberately goes out and murders civilians. That is completely inappropriate. And every Greens member should be ringing Adam Bant and saying that is inappropriate, and Adam Bant should be writing a public apology saying, you're right, I came out with some silly stuff in the heat of the moment. We all do that. I stuff up. I say stupid stuff.
Yep.
But he needs to come out and say what I said was stupid. He's not a terrorist. He's nothing like a terrorist. If I was the husband of someone that was killed by a terrorist, I would be fuming that Adam Bant said that, because it is not analogous.
If you're going to say something about someone, you've got to actually name what it is. So, yeah, it's not helpful to throw the word terrorism around. It's not helpful. I don't think it's helpful to throw the word illegals around. I want to stick with the actual name. Like when we've got 80 to 90% of our refugees have been found to be legitimate refugees, I don't understand why you think you can call them illegal immigrants. That's an incorrect term.
There's nothing illegal about what they've done. There is no law they've broken.
That's right. Calling Peter Dutton a terrorist is not right. I would rather call him for what he is, which...
A callous prick.
Well, I might even have stronger terms than that, or some darker terms. I do want to challenge, whether it's been Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton, whoever else has been in that role, and even the Labor Party.
Kevin Rudd?
Yes. Kevin Rudd, who a lot of this started with Kevin Rudd, that he changed Australia's policy to an offshore detention policy. And
so Kevin Rudd was the Australian version of Obama. In 2007, he was elected to great fanfare and didn't really do much of what he said he was going to do, other than saying sorry to Aboriginal people. He did symbolic things, and that's about it.
Symbology is important too. So, yeah, it did some good things, but
yeah,
it didn't last long, did it?
No.
No.
Until the next election. Anyway, so getting us back to the topic of refugees, because Kevin Rudd is getting us a little bit off topic.
Yep.
I've got Nick's trivia time, Kris.
Uh-oh. Where's my buzzer?
Bzz.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so Australia accepts anywhere between 13,000 and 20,000 people in our humanitarian program.
Yep.
With that information on hand,
yep.
Where do you think on the world's league tables does Australia stand for refugee intake? So there's 195 countries in the world. Where do you reckon we stand?
81?
81.
Yeah.
You going to lock in that answer?
No, actually, I think we'll be higher than that. I think we're in the 30s or 40s.
30s or 40s?
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't even use your buzzer, by the way.
Bzzz.
Yeah, there we go. It is not in the 30s or the 40s, but it does start with a 3. It's third.
Third.
We're the third highest.
Per capita, is it?
No, not per capita.
We take in the third highest amount of immigrants per year.
Not immigrants, in our humanitarian program.
In our humanitarian program, which is only, I thought that was like 6% of our immigration or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's like 3 or 4. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny.
So this year we will take in 6,000 refugees.
Yeah.
So this is within, we're taking in something like 13,750 in our humanitarian program this year. 6,000 of those are refugees. 5,000 of those are something called Special Humanitarian Program, which is essentially family members of people that have already been designated as refugees. And then 2,750 for onshore applications, so people that have reached the Australian mainland and said, hey, I'm a refugee. And out of that, we are third. So the United States is first. I think it's Canada is second, and we're third. Or maybe the United Kingdom. I can't remember who was second, but it was one of those, and we're third. So the UNHCR estimates that there will be 80,000 resettlement places offered, and there's more than 1 million needed each year.
I'm completely confused. Okay, Syria. Syria just happened, right?
Yeah, Syria just happened.
Millions of people.
Millions of people.
What, 14 million people or something? I don't know how many million were displaced, but a lot of people. A lot of people crossed the Mediterranean into all of those European countries.
Germany took in nearly 500,000. Are you saying we take in more
refugees or humanitarian type basis than Germany?
I'm just giving you the UNHCR facts, Kris. That's a very good point you raise. I don't know. Maybe they're not genuine refugees because they haven't been through the UNHCR process, maybe.
Right.
So, I don't know whether they would have gone to a UNHCR centre and said, hey, I'm a refugee. I think they all just, went, hey, I'm being killed. I need to cross this border right now.
Right.
But I don't know, Chris. That's a good question.
I'm finding all the numbers really complicated.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
Because I'm just aware that the refugee intake is a very small amount of our immigration intake.
Something like 200,000 people a year we take in, 180 or something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was 180. Yeah.
And so, yeah, the 6,000 refugees out of that is a tiny percentage.
Yeah. All right. So is that the only question in the quiz or is there more?
That was the only one.
Oh,
No,
what?
That's the only question.
So I failed.
I'll give you another one next week. All right, well, you want another question?
Yeah, give me another question.
This one doesn't have a right or wrong answer. Well, it probably does, actually. You're going to be wrong. So what is our motivation for wanting to help refugees?
What is our motivation? Because it's the right thing to do?
That's a good answer. I like that answer.
Okay.
It's wrong, but it's a good answer. So often, we would think about this in terms of the stories that I talked about at the start.
Yeah.
About, the people fleeing persecution, and we hear those stories and we want to help save their lives.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. You want to welcome the stranger. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, well, hey, you talked up a couple of weeks ago or whatever that you love the Jesus story and you want to base your morals and your values on Jesus.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Then, you need to welcome the stranger into your home. You need to feed them. You need to clothe them. You need to visit them while they're in prison or detention center. You need...
We can't visit them. We're not allowed.
I know, but churches are trying to take food to them and they're getting turned away by... Is it Border Force or is it their security? I mean, the private security is what worries me.
There's private security firms that don't pay tax.
ASIO is one thing, Border Patrol is another thing, but then there's Serco or whatever the other ones are.
Transcend.
Yeah, they're a worry. Where was I?
Where were you?
Jesus. That's where I was. Jesus. Jesus was a refugee.
Jesus was a refugee. He did not come by boat to Australia, it should be pointed out.
No.
The Aboriginals were very ambivalent towards Jesus. Anyway, there's two different things going on here. So our motivation for wanting to help refugees.
All right.
We hear these stories and we want to feel good about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And politicians take advantage of that. Because if either of the major parties just said, no, we're not taking any of these guys, a lot of people would just go, well, you guys are heartless bastards.
Mm.
And so the politicians have to take in refugees.
Mm.
And so there's obviously a difference within the parties of the number of people we take in, but that's the difference. So in 2012, Kevin Rudd, who we talked about earlier, he increased the Australian government's intake of refugees from 6,000 to 12,000. So he doubled it.
Mm.
How much do you reckon? Here's another quiz for you, Chris. How much do you reckon that would have cost to double that refugee intake from 6,000 to 12,000?
Oh, as if I'm going to be able to guess how many, billions of dollars or something. I don't know. $1 billion.
Yeah, you're close.
All right.
So it's 1.4 billion over 4 years.
Right.
Is that worth it?
Is that worth it?
Yeah.
Well, how do you measure it? How do you measure how it's worth it in a financial way? I mean, when you look at New York City.
I'm so glad you raised that.
New York City was built on, the sick and the weary and the, whatever, all coming to that city.
I don't know that the Indian Americans would say they were quite so pleased with that.
But I'm saying, yes, that there might be a short-term cost, but that doesn't mean... No, I'm not talking about the Indian Americans. I'm saying... I was actually talking about
You're a terrorist, Chris.
Financial economic cost to the nation of 1.4 over 4 years or whatever. But what does that produce for you in years to come when you've got citizens who are working for your nation and who are, paying their own taxes? And
so you're saying there's an economic cost, a short-term economic cost, and a long-term economic gain?
Potentially. I'm not saying that there is, but potentially, absolutely.
That sounds nice.
But what I was trying to say was that New York City, one of the most vibrant places in the world as far as cities go, was built on the backs of that sort of thing. So
that sounds lovely. I like that story you just told.
Well, I'm just saying, how do you measure the cost? That's all.
Well, yeah. Well, I've got a way to measure the cost for you, Chris.
All right, you tell me.
So for me personally, I don't want to help refugees just so that I can feel good about myself.
Right.
That's not my motivation.
Yep.
My motivation is because I want to save people's lives.
Yes. Right.
So there's an organisation called Give Well. They're a non-profit charity evaluator who advocate for effective altruism. So we don't want to be altruistic just to make ourselves feel good, but we want it to be effective.
Yeah.
They investigate the cost effectiveness of all the major charities in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go through each one and they work out how many lives are being saved by this organisation, how much does it cost to run this organisation. They go through that and work out how much dollars it costs to save one life through that organisation. They also work out the potential for increases in donations. So like if an organisation is already at their limit, then there's no point them trying to push that charity, because an increase in donations to that charity isn't going to increase the number of people saved. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they've gone through all these different charities. So for instance, have you heard of Kiva?
No.
They're a microfinance loan company. Have you heard of microfinance loans?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the idea with that is that us wealthy Westerners will give a certain amount of money, and that'll be an interest-free loan to a poor, starving lady in India who will be able to use that money to buy some chickens so she can use the chickens to lay some eggs and earn an income to send her kids to school so that she can break out of the...
Poverty cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a brilliant idea.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Sounds like it. Yeah.
Sounds like it. Makes sense to us who don't actually know the facts. So when GiveWell investigated them, they found that one of Kiva's major partners had profit margins of over 25%, which is a large profit margin for an organisation that's meant to be non-profit, who is meant to be giving interest-free loans to people. So you're donating your money to a company that has very large profit margins and also has a dropout rate of 49%. So 49% of the people that take up those loans choose for themselves that this is not worthwhile, I'm dropping out.
Okay.
And so that's one example. But so the reason I bring up GiveWell is because the one that they have found to be the most cost-effective charity is one called Against Malaria Foundation, which they estimate the cost to save a life is about $3,340. The reason I bring this up, Kris, is because if we actually want to use our limited resources to save as many lives as possible, not just to make ourselves feel good, because we hear these stories that I read at the top, they pull at your heartstrings and they're real stories and it sucks for those people. And we do have an obligation to help as many people as we can.
Yep.
So by that calculation of GiveWell of $3,340 per life, when the Rudd Australian government spent $1.4 billion over 4 years for those 6,000 extra refugees, that could have saved 420,000 lives instead of 6,000.
Okay.
So are we doing this because it makes us feel good? Or do we want to say, what is the most cost effective? How many lives can I save? Can I use this $1.4 billion to save 6,000 people, or can I use it to save 420,000 people? To me, that's a no-brainer. Even if one doesn't make me feel as good about myself as the other one.
Yeah, no, you got a really good point. If we want to talk about money, I can take it in a slightly different direction.
Go.
We spend $400K per person, $400,000 a year per person to keep them in offshore detention. We could keep them in detention centres in Australia for $239,000 a year. If we kept them just in community detention, it would be less than $100,000 a year. And if we just had them living in the community on a bridging visa while they were processed, it'd be $40,000 a year, which is 1/10 of what we pay to keep them in offshore detention.
But we don't want, like any boat that comes to Australia, we don't want to bring every single person on that boat to our neighbourhoods and say, you're in straight away. We're not going to do any background checks. We're just going to send you straight in.
Yeah, you have to go through a processing centre. But a lot of countries, you manage to go through a processing centre within a matter of weeks, not a matter of 3 or 4 years, which happens to a lot of asylum seekers that end up with us. So why should it take that long?
I don't know why it takes that long. I think that's...
Well, if there are other nations that can do it in a matter of weeks, why can't we do it in a matter of weeks? I think that's ridiculous just to say that, well, we're not privy to the information ASIO has, and I'm going, no, 3 or 4 years is ridiculous.
But you're saying it's ridiculous without knowing any of the facts, without knowing why it takes 3 or 4 years. Like, so when the Rudd government were in charge...
It can't take 3 or 4 years. It can't.
Give me your reasons. Give me what knowledge do you have?
What information do you not have that you need to get that's going to take 3 or 4 years to get?
So we know there is a real risk of terrorists using the refugee platform to get into Australia. We know it's happened in the past. We know that it will continue to happen.
Yeah, and so we put them through a processing centre to try and establish if that's them, right?
When they get to Australia, like if they're on a boat, if you are a terrorist, you are not going to keep your passport with you. You're not going to hold it with you that says, I'm an Islamic State member. So finding out who that person is, what their history is, I can only imagine how difficult a job that is. And again, these aren't politicians that are doing that job. They are public servants who don't have a connection with any political party. They are just like you or me. We can't demonise them as they're just political puppets who are just doing whatever Tony Abbott or Pauline Hanson or Cory Bernardi tell them to do. I don't know why it takes 3 or 4 years. And I'm not pretending to know why.
So you're saying I'm pretending to know why?
You are. Tell me that you're not. Like, the processing times weren't any quicker when Kevin Rudd was in power.
No.
It's not like Kevin Rudd came into power and went, right, let's actually do this, like, properly. And it wasn't just that the Liberal government were deliberately dragging their heels on this thing.
So why are New Zealand prepared to take all of our 606 refugees?
Oh, well, I think they're only taking 150, aren't they? They offered to take 150.
All right.
But yes.
So why are they happy to take 150? Bang, just do it. You know, and we tell them that, they're apparently not our responsibility anymore. We've closed the centre, and yet there was a great tweet that was put out by someone from the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre saying, then if they're not our responsibility anymore, how are we able to say no to New Zealand?
I don't think anyone's saying they're not our responsibility. I think they're saying Australian government didn't just close the facility. They've set up another facility that they can move into. Now, the asylum seekers are saying that it's not a safe place, and, you know, what the hell would I know?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Yeah. Right.
But it's not like Australia have just closed the camp and said, good luck to yous. Like, they've actually got another place to go and stay.
But the question is it safe? Yeah.
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 And, you know, you wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't have a clue. If you're a person that just demonises Dutton and says he's a callous prick who doesn't care about these human beings, well, then I can understand why you would just go, well, obviously the asylum seekers are right and Dutton doesn't care if they get shot.
Well, I'm angry at Dutton. I'm angry at Scott Morrison. I'm angry at all of them because, well, for starters, they claim to be Christian. For me, it's just straightforward. Hospitality is you welcome the refugee. You welcome them. Okay, we can put them through a processing centre. That's very sensible, right? But you're meant to welcome these people. That's the moral ground that you say that you adhere to. You welcome them, you feed them, you dress them, you visit them, you whatever you do for the least of these, right? You've done to me. And I'm going, I don't know how some of them sleep at night because I have trouble sleeping at night sometimes when I'm thinking about all the things that are being done in Australia's name. I get pretty emotional about this. Because I remember a time when we didn't do this, what we're doing now to people. And when our leaders like Malcolm Fraser did a right but, not popular thing, bringing a large amount of Vietnamese refugees to our shores. And if we aren't, welcoming to other people and being hospitable, if we shun them or close the door, then we can contribute to the breeding of the resentment that, goes away towards someone feeling ill will towards us and maybe getting caught up in radicalisation. You don't agree with that?
Terrorism. You cannot say that terrorism is occurring because the West aren't accepting enough asylum seekers.
Why can I not say that?
Because it doesn't make any sense.
How would it not make any sense? If you're not welcome in a place, so you don't feel like you belong, you feel like everyone's suspicious of you, you feel like an outcast. What I'm saying is then that there are terrorist organisations which will take that opportunity of seeing that young person who's that disengaged from the rest of that society and will start whispering in their ear and lead them down a path. We just need to be a lot better at not being a contributor to someone's radicalisation, by helping them, I guess, feel embraced by the wider community. They've run to us with hope and we can harden our hearts and put them through further dehumanisation and mental anguish But yes, it's a risk. I want to make it a calculated one at least. But yeah, some will slip through the cracks and people will say, how could you let that happen? Why don't you just close the door completely?
But you don't have to close the door completely. You can say, we are going to take 3 or 4 years to make sure these people are not going to be terrorists.
We're not taking them at all. We just refuse to take...
We are taking refugees. But
we're not taking...
6,000 a year.
We refuse to take anyone that tried to arrive here by boat as if by boat is somehow any different to arriving by plane or
Yeah.
whatever.
But if we take those people, then we don't take other people from other places in the world.
Yeah, okay. And I don't care where they come from. I'd be quite happy to take people from elsewhere in the world. But if they've come to you and they're on your doorstep and they're knocking on the door, we have a responsibility to acknowledge that.
We have a responsibility to make sure they are the people they are claiming to be and that
Yes.
they're not coming to our country for harmful purposes. And if that takes 3 or 4 years, then that takes 3 or 4 years.
But even after the 3 or 4 years, they're not coming here. The 606 men in Manus Island are never coming here.
No,
Yeah.
but if we can make sure they're going to a place that is safe-ish.
I could live with that, but I'd want to hear it from them that they feel that it's safe.
Yeah, but like Papua New Guinea is not a good place, okay? I'm not trying to convince you that Papua New Guinea is a tropical location that everyone just wants to go and live. But we can't take every person from Papua New Guinea and accept them into Australia. We can't take everyone from Malaysia and let them into Australia. It's just not possible. So saying the place you're coming from is so scary that you can't go there. Here's some other places in the world. Yeah, they're not as good as Australia is. They're not as safe as Australia is.
Well,
But
why-
we can't take everyone.
Here's that question then. So why can't we take everyone?
So accepting 6,000 refugees in 2012 cost us $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
If you want to feel good about yourself, then go for it. That's the way to do it. But if you want to save lives, it's not the way to do it. You're wasting money.
But where do those 6,000 people go?
I don't know.
Okay.
But you can't pretend like Australia can solve every problem in the world. In the same way that I can't solve every problem in the world. It's not my responsibility that 9 million children die every year because of poverty. That sucks, and I do what I can. I send money overseas to organisations that I believe do good work. But I don't beat myself up that I don't save every single child. And Australia can't beat itself up that we're not fixing the entire world. Now, that doesn't absolve our responsibility to do something. We absolutely should be doing as much as we possibly can. Like, I think we agree there. Like, to me, the foreign aid budget should be way higher than what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the lever that we need to be pulling to save lives.
Yeah, we should be putting our resources where we can save the most amount of people. I mean, that's just blindingly obvious. But I get annoyed with some of the arguments here in our country when it comes to, we shouldn't be taking refugees because we should be looking after our own people. We should be looking after our own homeless people. And I'm going, yeah, we should be looking after our own homeless people. That doesn't necessarily equate to, we can't be spending this money on refugees. There are multinational organizations that aren't paying any tax. If you want to get some more money to, do something, there's plenty of people out there making lots of money that we can get some more money to be doing both things. It's not like, So I hate that argument. Okay, yeah, 1.4 billion would be better spent. But I'm still like, well, what can we do for those 6,000 still? And if they come to our country, what do? We still have to do something with them. And we are one of the richest countries in the world per capita. We're a rich country. It's like we're one of the richest countries in the world. Yes, if we help more people, yes, it's going to cost us. It should. Of course it's going to cost us, but we still enjoy a very high lifestyle. I mean, what makes us better than that lady you were talking about at the start? She is a human being. I'm a human being. Why do I deserve everything that she can't have?
You don't.
No.
Neither do I.
So I just find this whole, close the borders mentality out of national interest. Oh, and look, I don't want a flood of people. Our cities are getting overcrowded. But why not build a new city? China do it. But anyway, the rise of white nationalists and patriots, I don't know. I just see national interest as becoming another name for self-interest, for selfishness.
So once you let people into Australia, we have a safety net. We have...
Yes, yeah.
And so if you're going to allow those people in, that just goes through the roof. And so that's what the $1.4 billion is. Like, it costs a fortune. You can't just say we're going to let these people in and then not help them at all and just let them starve.
Yeah, well, tax multinational companies then. Damn it.
I agree, Chris. I've been to Canberra and lobbied about multinational tax, so I agree with you 100% on that, but it's not a panacea. It's not an endless bucket of money.
I just don't think it's all about money and resources. It's also about a will to tackle the problem.
I agree. We should be giving till it hurts. We should not just be saying we're a wealthy country and screw everyone else. We shouldn't be pretending that we are actually poor when we're not. We are not poor in Australia. We are one of the richest countries ever this world has ever seen. And we should be doing more to help other countries. But the way to do that is through helping people who are in their own countries. It's not bringing them to our country. We want to make Myanmar a safe place for everyone. And we want to do whatever we can to make that happen. That's a far easier thing. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to do. Probably not Myanmar, actually, but other countries in the world, there are people dying from very simple things that we can give money to that will save their life.
War isn't simple, though. Genocide isn't simple.
No.
There are things that fall outside of that response, but still need a response to a desperate need.
But in saying yes to those refugees, you are saying no to other people who will die. And you won't know their names, you won't know anything about them, but they will still die.
So who do you say yes to and who do you say no to? So you're saying wherever you think the resources can save the most amount of lives. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If $3,000 can save one person's life and $1 million can save one person's life, well, I want to spend the $3,000 to save that one person's life. And not just pocket the rest of the money for myself, but so that I can use that to save more people's lives.
Right.
Like, I agree with what you're talking about the selfishness of Australia. I think we do cry poor when we're not poor. Australia do need to wake up, stop watching A Current Affair and pretending like we're all a poor bunch of people. We're not. We are ridiculously wealthy.
I'm like that. I feel like I'm struggling all the time. And actually, I can eat whatever I want. I can drink whatever I want. I'm online. I'm, able to get my car on the road, and it feels like a struggle. But I remember doing you can do an online quiz to find out where you rate in the richest people in the world. And so, ask questions like, do you have any coins, in the back of your couch?
Yeah.
Do you have any loose change in your wallet? How much money do you earn per annum? How many people live in the house?
Global Rich List, I think it's called.
Yeah, and, what sort of education levels have you gotten to and everything? So that was shocking to me to realise at that point where I felt like I was pretty skint, that I was in the top 7% richest people in the world.
Yep.
That freaked me out. It's crazy.
Yep. We need to stop being selfish bums.
But it's not just selfishness that concerns me. It's the use of fear and tapping into racist attitudes that is a worry as well. I mean, I was listening to Jared McKenna just earlier today, and he was saying that modern-day Australia has its foundation in a white Australia policy. That was the first thing they enacted. Ain't that a grand bit of history? But yeah, Jared McKenna, he's an Aussie and one of the founders of the First Home Project and the Love Makes a Way movement, which is a bunch of Christians who do non-violent protests in an attempt to change the government's views towards asylum seekers. And he had strung himself up on the side of a building.
Julie Bishop's office.
Yeah, and he had a Love Makes a Way sign above him and a Manus SOS sign below.
But the First Home Project for him is where he houses refugees. He lives with them. So it's very personal for him. He has these personal connections with these people. We did a podcast just recently about same-sex marriage and homosexuality, and realising that when we got to know homosexual people and realised that they were people, that they weren't the enemy and they were just people. And I feel like when you get to know someone of a different race or a different religion or a different culture, if you get to know them, then they're people. And I think that's one of the problems, is there's suspicion on both sides.
And some of it might be valid, but then you get politicians and the media whipping up even more fear.
You mean by like telling the facts?
Media telling the facts? Oh, come on. As if media just tell the facts nowadays.
No, of course not, because, the ABC will report that Peter Dutton is a terrorist. Like, that's a newsworthy story.
It's a story.
It's a story, but it's not the story that they're telling.
Surely ABC will report what was said. They're not going to put an opinion on it. And that's my issue with a lot of...
Of course they do.
There's no media that doesn't have some sort of bias and agenda in it. Everything that we do, every person has some sort of bias and agenda. But as far as you can go to try and be down the middle... You trust ASIO to be down the middle? I trust ABC to be down the middle as far as...
You trust them more than ASIO?
Not more. I'm saying the way that you trust ASIO to do their job properly, right? I trust the ABC to do their job properly because they are a public company.
Anyway, going back to your same-sex marriage, when you get to know a homosexual, all those things that you've built up in your mind, they all get broken away. And same thing with Jared McKenna taking in refugees into his house. Jared McKenna is only accepting the people into his house that ASIO have said, yep, they can come into our country.
Yeah.
He's not accepting the people into his house that ASIO have rejected.
Right.
It's not the same thing, because the refugees that make it to Australia are the ones that we've said we're at least reasonably confident these are safe people.
But when a large majority of the Manus Island detainees have been declared as legitimate asylum seekers and that they're fleeing trouble, not bringing it, why can't most of them come to Australia, and hang out in Jared McKenna's house?
Even Russell Crowe wants to put him up in jobs and into his place.
Good old Rusty.
When this sort of topic was being raised a few years ago, I was like, I've got a spare room. Instead of spending the $400K to put someone offshore, give me some and I'll house them.
Yep. So if Australia starts taking these people into our country, will we have more people seeking asylum in Australia?
Yes.
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 And
that's why we have a hardline response, because they're trying to cut that out. Yeah.
And we both acknowledge that when Kevin Rudd raised the refugee intake, do you agree that was a wasteful use of our money, that we could have saved more lives another way?
I will say we could have saved more lives, yes.
But you think we shouldn't have?
No. It's not that. It's just I want to be idealistic. I want to do both.
So if we had an endless bucket of money, yeah, absolutely. We should take in every refugee and still do the security checks, but, let as many in as that are legitimate.
I would love it if no one felt that they needed to be a refugee and they could stay in their own country.
Yeah.
Who wants to move to another country, different culture? You don't want to leave your home and its history and its traditions and your family line, and you don't want to have to leave that.
No.
And the world's pretty screwed up in a lot of places. The West could be doing a lot to make a difference. And the West does stuff as well that contributes to a lot of those problems.
There's been plenty of foreign policy stuff that we've done that has caused plenty of harm.
Yes.
We definitely agree with that.
I mean, it comes back to the golden rule. You treat others how you want to be treated. So I'm like, if I'm a refugee and I'm fleeing a country and I'm being shot at or threatened, my partner's going to be killed, raped, shot, whatever, I want someone to help me.
And if you're a father in India who has a kid who doesn't have a bed net and there are mosquitoes with malaria around, you want someone to buy a bed net and to have vaccinations. You want all of that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say we're going to let the 6,000 just die or drown in the sea or whatever, and we're going to help because yikes, it's a much bigger number, the 420,000. What's the problem with selling that to the Australian people?
Yeah. I don't know. I can only presume it's the political side of it, that you've got a story to tell. These stories of the Rohingyas are horrific. Like, when I read that story, I'm literally in tears. And it's horrible that those things are happening to people. And my heart just immediately says we have to help these people. But then my head goes, I don't have endless amounts of money. I can't save everyone. So I have to make difficult decisions. Do I save the 3 people here or the 2 people here? Neither of those are good decisions.
I reckon. And I've been wishing for a long time that it wasn't a political football used for political gain, that stirs up the not so good sides of us. Why can't there be like a committee that's not politically affiliated that could, help us to follow the spirit of the law? Why can't we be better at meeting our foreign aid global commitments? Because the percentage that they're asking for us to raise in foreign aid from our GDP is minuscule in the grand scheme of things, but it can make a huge difference. And I've just been, sickened by some of the things that have been done in our name. At least doctors and nurses and psychiatrists, aid organisations, churches, a lot of people are standing up in the face of the government for this, and, they've been ordered to be quiet, but they're not being silent. They're saying, arrest me if you have to, because it's wrong. The dehumanisation of giving numbers over names, the lack of duty of care for mental and physical health. It's not Guantanamo or fascist Germany, but it's people in a concentrated area, in a camp. And there's no way that this is right. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't going to be the most cost effective, but as much as we can, I'll, admit that we should do the most we can with what resources we have.
Even if that means turning away refugees. And maybe not living up to the spirit of the law of the UN Convention.
But if someone comes and knocks at your door...
The human story. I agree.
If, someone says, here I am, I need food, I need water, I need shelter.
Yeah, you help them.
You can't just turn them away with no place to go.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you 100%. In the sense that I'd rather say 420,000 people than 6,000. But on the other side of the coin, I can't just turn that person away that comes and says, I need help.
Yep.
Not just turn them away, but imprison them for years and put them through mental torture.
Yeah.
Can't do it. And I don't know how anyone claiming to be a Christian thinks that that's cool.
I don't think they would think it's cool. I think they would say you can't let everyone in. Like there's a lady who I work with at school, lovely old lady who comes in and volunteers at the school. And at the time of the last election, we have awesome chats all the time. She's a Christian lady, but a wacko Christian lady like you and me. I ask her all those questions that most people don't like talking about. So I asked her who she was going to vote for. And she said Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. And I was like, what? What is wrong with you? And like, this is a nice old lady that comes into the school, and there's refugee kids at the school who she just loves and goes and gives hugs, and probably her favourite students. And this blew my mind, like how it just felt so incongruous. But then you talk to her and she explains why, and yeah, okay, you do have real reasons. You're not a racist just because you vote for Pauline Hanson. Just like you were saying about homosexuals. You got to get to know these people.
Yep. And just going back, you can't let everyone in, but that doesn't excuse treating them like shit. And there's things that I've walked streets. I've joined protests about that. Like even listening to Jared McKenna talk about that protest, the guy that he was interviewing him, he's saying, why are you doing it? What do you think it will achieve? And he's like going, you know what? I don't even know if this is the right thing to do. I don't know if this is the most effective thing to do. If it's the wrong thing to do, I'll be the first to go, you know what? Sorry, I was wrong, but I couldn't do nothing. I just couldn't sit there and do nothing while this was going on. Like I went to the Lighting the Dark ceremony for when Reza Barati, who was one that got killed at Manus, when the community all fired on them and so on. So he got killed. I went there to that. And that, it was really interesting. It was and it was one of the most profound things, that Biz my wife had ever said to me. She says a lot of profound things, but this was one of them, which was, this is what church should be like. As we were walking in and we were surrounded by this whole community of diverse people, old people that were all with these lovely smiling faces, and young people. There was just, there's like 20,000 of us. And she was like, this is what church should be like. And I was like, yeah, that meant a lot. And then the next time we went was for the little boy, Aylin, the Syrian boy.
Yeah. Syrian dude.
The little kid who washed up on the beach, and I can't go, but there's another one happening tomorrow. But I do get a bit disillusioned with the protesting. I'm not sure that it does anything. And when you get 20,000 and it feels like a lot when you're there, you get 70 or 80,000 to the MCG to watch a football match though. That's what I get a bit dispirited about, So there's a lot of people that can mobilise to go and watch a game of football. And it's really hard to get a lot of people to mobilise to protest. And maybe that's because protest doesn't really seem to do anything. I don't know. If we got 100,000 or 200,000 people to a protest, I feel like it would do something.
Yeah, you're probably wrong. You'd probably be disappointed.
I might be disappointed, but I wonder. Let's find out. Let's do it.
So it might change the Labor Party. It's not going to change the Liberal Party. But so you were talking before about having had a profound moment at the Light the Dark remembrance.
We lit candles. We heard stories from refugees about, their personal stories, which were, heartbreaking. And and they had things to say about the government.
So along those lines, Kris, I also went to one of those in Tassie.
Yeah.
And I had a profound moment also.
Right.
And it was connected with people that do go to church.
Right.
So I was there talking with them. I've known them for years. I worked at the church that they go to and have been at for a long time. And I think Scott Morrison was the immigration minister at that time. And they were talking about him, just the way they talked about him, the look in their eye and the words they were using. It was just like they thought he was the devil. Like he was just the most evil man alive. Like he was their Hitler. He was their Stalin. I vividly remember it, just looking at them going, you've just demonized this dude. You don't even consider that he's a human being, that he might have reasons for what he's doing. For me, it's exactly the same thing as what you're talking about with gay people, that people at the extremes, they've created caricatures that these people are the devil and they're just going to fight against them no matter what. And I just remember sitting there going, geez, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these people here are just loonies who've just convinced themselves that the people on the other side of this debate are evil, and they're not even willing to look at what are the reasons why this person is acting the way he is. And so from that moment, I went, all right, I'm going to look into this. Because, like you said, Scott Morrison is a Christian dude who, at least in theory, should care about the poor and should care about being graceful and generous and all those sort of things. And so, you know, I don't just want to ask the question rhetorically. I actually want to ask and look for answers as to how does he do that? Like, why does he do that?
Well, I wasn't happy with him.
Neither was I.
He was the one that gave a directive to everyone within the party and within the field that was working with asylum seekers and refugees that they were to be referred to now only as illegal, what was it?
Illegal maritime arrivals?
Yes. Yeah, but he was the one who screamed from the rooftops every piece of data that he could gather on arrivals of refugees. You know, he even had billboards that he would stand in front of. But then he got into power and he shut up shop. Flat out refused to answer any reasonable questions. So one of my problems with him relates to him putting everything behind this veil of secrecy. Robert A. Heinlein, he said, secrecy is the beginning of tyranny. And yeah, so secrecy can create a place where in the dark, you know, human rights violations can more easily happen. So due to all, you know, so many things that he enacted, I was pretty pissed off with him. And you're right. I did demonize him, and I'm probably going to find it pretty hard not to keep doing that. And you're right again in that I probably need to get to know someone well enough to know the how and the why. And I want to do that because from what I can see, you know, on the surface, when it comes to politicians like him, and I don't want to paint all politicians this way, but some of the names that we've been dropping, I'm highly suspicious that their motivation is power and they will do what they deem necessary to ascertain and to keep that power. So we're to blame in that sense, you know.
And it's pure coincidence that all of those power-hungry politicians just happen to be the immigration ministers.
It's not a job you want to take on, is it?
Not if you like people on the left, no.
It's a cursed portfolio.
It's a complicated one, and most people don't like complicated because we're busy. You and I are busy. We don't spend all day looking at these issues, and so we do get caught up by one side of the issue often. I know I certainly have been.
Yeah. And I've been very, very far left on this issue. There was someone said, you know, nations rise and fall depending on how they reflect the glory of God or something. But it's more for me about how they treat the least of these. That's, I think, when you end up with a nation that becomes very selfish, when you end up with a lot of inequality within that nation, or you've got a dictatorship or a plutocracy or whatever, when you have a lot of people at the top with a lot of power and the social fabric starts crumbling and starts fraying. I've been saying this a lot. I want to be someone who tries to mend that social fabric. And I'm not going to pretend that that's an easy thing for me to do, especially when it comes to this issue. That's a challenge, Nick. It's been challenging talking to you.
It's been challenging for me learning all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not start life thinking that we shouldn't accept one refugee, which is not actually what I believe, to be clear. I don't know what the appropriate number is, but I do think that cost analysis should go into it.
You presented that really well, and I don't understand why more people don't present that argument.
The message that I've learnt out of this issue is that I take some ownership, Nick. I need to get better at listening to people on the other side of issues, of contentious issues that I am passionate about. I need to get better.
No. I need to get better. You're doing all right at that one.
Yeah, but it took me 30 years. That's ridiculous. I don't want to be like that in any of these other issues that I feel passionately about. I want to be able to listen with clarity at everyone. I want to listen and go, where is the truth? And where am I wrong? I know I've been wrong plenty of times before. There's no reason to think that I'll be right about this.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. And I also want to, and this is the tricky bit, I want to see people of all walks of life humanized and not dehumanized.
Yep. For you listening to this podcast, we want to hear from you guys too.
Yeah, we do.
If you think we're crazy or if there's something that we've missed that is just bleedingly obvious to you, let us know because we don't know everything.
No, there's stuff though that is bleedingly obvious to me that we've missed when I listen back to them myself. So I'm like, should have said that. Should have said that. So so please do put those things in for us.
Stay tuned to Chris's blog because he will be writing his rebuttal.
I've written enough blogs on refugees, but maybe I do need to write a new one because they were pretty angry. Yeah, I'm still angry, still bloody furious.
Good, you should be angry.
Yeah, but I'm happy to be angry about it, but challenged to figure out what's the best way forward.
It's complicated.
Write to us. Give us the answers.
Set us straight, people.
Thanks for listening.
We love you all. Kris has a spare room in his house, he said, so you can stay at his place.
Anytime. You can get us on Facebook, Twitter. We've got our blog.
That's the only way you can contact me. Don't try and stay at my house, people.
Need a place to stay in Sydney? Let me know.
I'll post Chris's address on this.
I don't want to be flooded, and you'll have to be vetted by Nick first before you can come and stay. So
vetted by Biz, I would imagine, is more likely.
Yeah, probably.
Farewell. Much love.
Scott here again. If at any point in this podcast you found yourself yelling vainly into the void at two idiots who can't even hear you and refuse to listen to you, then congratulations, you know exactly how I feel. Luckily for you, there are other ways to contribute. You can leave reviews on iTunes or wherever you listen to it, share it on social media, or discuss it in your blog, podcast, or fellowship group. Subscribe, like, nod your head, raise your fist, shout amen, but probably don't send a prayer because I'm kind of busy right now.